Stavros Xaritos, είμαι δημοσιογράφος από το Mono News και μετά τη διεξοδική ανάλυση των εμπορικών και πολιτικών σχέσεων Ελλάδας-ΗΠΑ θα ασχοληθούμε με ένα ιδιαίτερα σύνθετο θέμα που αφορά πάρα πολύ κόσμο και έχει να κάνει με τα κρυπτονομίσματα, την εποπτεία τους, το Fintech και όλα αυτά, το πώς επηρεάζουν τις αγορές. Γι' αυτό τον λόγο θα υποδεχτώ στο πάνελ την κυρία Βασιλική Λαζαράκου, την πρόεδρο της Ελληνικής Επιτροπής Κεφαλαίου Αγοράς και τον κύριο Γιώργο Θεοχαρίδη, τον ομότιμό της από την Κύπρο. Καθίστε. Λοιπόν, μετά την υιοθέτηση του Ευρωπαϊκού Κανονισμού MiCA, οι εποπτικές αρχές, έχοντας ως αντικείμενο την εποπτεία των κρυπτοστοιχείων, αντιμετωπίζεται σαφέστατα προκλήσεις. Υπάρχουν ακόμα κάποια νομοθετικά κενά που πιστεύετε ότι θα πρέπει να αντιμετωπιστούν σε ευρωπαϊκό ή εθνικό επίπεδο? Θα ήθελα να ξεκινήσουμε από τις κυρίες πρώτα. Την κυρία Λαζαράκου.
Ευχαριστώ πολύ, κύριε Χαρίτο. Καλημέρα σε όλους. Κυρία Σαμπράκου, συγχαρητήρια για αυτή την πολύ ωραία εκδήλωση την οποία έχετε καταφέρει για μια ακόμη φορά να διοργανώσετε με άψογο τρόπο. Γιατί είναι σημαντικό να ακούγονται και θέματα δύσκολα, κύριε Χαρίτο, όπως αναφέρατε, και πολύπλοκα, όπως είναι τα κρυπτοστοιχεία. Και γιατί είναι πολύπλοκο το θέμα αυτό? Γιατί είναι καινούριο, είναι κάτι νέο. Και όλη αυτή η συζήτηση, αν θέλετε, για τα κρυπτοστοιχεία ξεκίνησε για λόγους χρηματοπιστωτικής σταθερότητας, τότε που το Facebook είχε πει ότι θα βγάλει κρυπτονόμισμα. Αλλά θα συνεχίσω στα αγγλικά, για λόγους σεβασμού, αν θέλετε, του διεθνούς κοινού. And I'm going to turn and speak in English, and I will just try to say which, in my view, are the most important issues regarding the regulatory and the aspect. So, at global level, the regulatory framework for the crypto assets is still under development, despite significant progress that has been made around the globe the last years. Different approaches around the globe have been followed. Some countries have decided to proceed to a bespoke regime, to introduce new legislation. Other countries have decided, other jurisdictions have decided to change existing legislation in order to make sure that adapt to the new developments. So in Europe, what we have done, and you mentioned about that, Mr. Xaritos and Mr. Theocharides, and we're very pleased to have here with us Mr. Theocharides, who is the chair of the CYSEC, as you mentioned. We have discussed a lot among ourselves with all the European regulators the developments that arose in Europe. What that Europe has done, Europe has introduced its own regulation, which is a bespoke regime, the so-called MiCA, the markets in crypto assets. And why Europe decided something like that? Because it wanted to provide clarity and to make sure that, let's say, there is certainty as far as the regulations for crypto assets are concerned. This has an advantage because you can attract market participants who want to be, let's say, to work in a regulated environment, but also present challenges. And challenges where the global regulatory landscape is still under development. And the challenges usually are linked to competition issues, especially if the other markets are really huge in size. And sometimes the market participants prefer to be in other markets than to be in a regulated European market. So Europe regulators, in my view, should make efforts to make sure that we achieve convergent application for MiCA so that internally we apply the rules in Europe in the same way. And these are huge efforts that we make among ourselves, Yorgos, myself, and all the other 25 regulators, to make sure that we apply the MiCA regulation in exactly the same way, which is really hard to do because each jurisdiction has its own specificities. And at the same time, all of us in Europe need to make sure that we support let's say, the global convergence in a way so that we ensure the same level of investor protection and market integrity. Why? Because crypto assets are really a global thing. When we speak about crypto assets, we cannot only focus in Europe. We have to think globally, and we have to make sure that some protection issues are there around the globe, and not only Europe. So Europe will be required to proceed to a review of the legislation according to the MiCA, according to the regulation, where I think it will be the best opportunity to make sure that we find out which are the, let's say, the areas that maybe we don't have convergent application, and then we try to fix it. And more, we need to make sure that we also cover other issues which are not already covered in MiCA, like, for example, staking or borrowing, lending and borrowing, decentralized finance. I'm sure that George will speak more about this. So from a European point of view, there are gaps for sure that we need to make sure that we fill in. However, we already have a very good, let's say, framework which can operate, and right now all of us are making sure that we try to supervise our entities in our jurisdictions according to this framework and taking into account all the relevant specificities around the globe. So my message, I would say, is convergence. Convergence in Europe, but also supporting convergence around the globe.
Mr. Theocharides.
Ναι, και εγώ να ευχαριστήσω τους διοργανωτές, την αγαπητή Ιωάννα, για την πρόσκληση να είμαι σε αυτό το συνέδριο, αυτό το πολύ ενδιαφέρον συνέδριο. Να γυρίσω και εγώ τώρα στα αγγλικά την απάντηση μου. So I'll turn now to English for my reaction. I would add to what Vassiliki has mentioned that MiCA, or Markets in Crypto Assets Regulation, it is a landmark regulation in Europe. It's the first major jurisdiction that has formed a regulatory framework, a complete regulatory framework for the area of the crypto assets or the digital assets. There has been a lot of work starting from the summer of 2024, I believe, 23, summer of 2023, when the legislation was actually passed at the European Parliament, and then there was an 18-month period for all of us to get ready for the regulation to come into force. The regulation came into force on January 1st of this year, and as Vassiliki has mentioned, a lot of the effort that has been undertaken by all of us in Europe at this point in time is to have convergence in our practices, and at the moment we're basically talking about authorization practices because we are still at the authorization stage. A number of entities have been applying to get a license within a European member state, and there has been a lot of work through the committees of ESMA that we both belong, which is the European Securities Markets Authority, so that we have some type of convergence in our practices. I think to a large extent we have achieved that. I can tell you that major global firms that they want to operate in Europe, global crypto firms that they want to operate in Europe, are considered to be what we call them the key CASPs, or the key crypto asset service providers, and they had to go through a very extensive process through not only scrutiny from the member state that they have applied, but scrutiny through committees of ESMA, through scrutiny from all the member states of Europe for them to be able to get a license. So there has been a lot of work. Now we will be moving into the supervision phase, where basically these entities now, once they have the license, they will be able to operate. And it remains to be seen, basically. I'm sure that there will be challenges in the months and years ahead, but I'm optimistic that, given the whole effort that has been taken all this time, basically, that we are in Europe in the right direction. And what we're seeing is that, Vassiliki mentioned about, the international perspective. Now we're seeing that, the United States, they had a very different view, basically, with the previous administration as it regards to the digital assets. Now we have seen a complete turnaround also from the United States. We have seen the Genius Act on stable coins that came out this summer. We have seen I think it's called the Project Crypto from the SEC, basically, or the United States SEC, to define basically these types of assets. So we have seen a very an approach from the United States that is very pro-crypto and pro-digital assets compared to what we have seen before. The same we're seeing also for the United Kingdom and other parts of Asia, for example, Singapore and so on. So we have this international dimension as well, and the positive view from global players. Now, Vassiliki mentioned that there are certain aspects of these regulation that are not covered, or certain assets of the industry that are not covered, which is true. For example, decentralized finance, which is still small in value, but it has been expanding. This is an area that is not captured by the current regulation. What the current regulation does basically is regulating centralized systems. So any decentralized systems basically are not captured by MiCA. So most probably when we'll see MiCA 2.0, similar to what we had with MiFID for the financial instruments and MiFID 2, I'm sure that it will expand to decentralized finance, or for example NFTs, non-fungible tokens, which is again a huge area of the digital assets industry. And finally, what I wanted to point out that this is an industry that it has been expanding considerably. So I'll give you some numbers in size, basically. At the end of June of 2025, the size of this market was in value was more than $3 trillion US. Okay, so this is a considerable amount. I mean, we're talking about 3 trillions. Or more than 3 trillions, right? If we're talking about stable coins, which Vassiliki mentioned, which is true that at the beginning, and still basically there is a lot of fear as it regards to stable coins. We're more than 200 billion basically of issuance of stable coins. And now we're seeing also the linkages between the digital assets or crypto assets and traditional finance. For example, we have exchange-traded funds in the US that are traded where the underlying asset is a Bitcoin or the Ethereum. We are seeing futures contracts traded on the Chicago Mercantile Exchange on Bitcoin and so on. So now we have all these traditional linkages. So it's not only a matter of protecting the individual investor, it's also a matter of financial stability, right? Because any crisis in the crypto industry is not going to stay only within the crypto industry. It can transmit and propagate to other financial industries, right? So we have to be careful, but I think we are in the right direction, and I'll stop here.
Έχετε υπολογίσει στην ελληνική αγορά, είπατε για 3 τρισεκατομμύρια παγκόσμια. Ωραία. Τι μερίδιο υπάρχει στην ελληνική αγορά, πόσοι είναι οι χρήστες, τι ποσά παίζουν στην ελληνική και την κυπριακή αγορά βεβαίως, αν υπάρχει κάποια προσέγγιση σε αυτό.
Δεν θεωρώ ότι υπάρχουν τώρα στοιχεία, τουλάχιστον εμάς για την Κύπρο, δεν έχουμε κάποια στοιχεία για να πούμε τι ακριβώς, επειδή αυτή, I should change to English? Okay. So just because everybody, for the foreign, for people from abroad. What I was going to say is that we don't have any data right now as it regards to the size of the market in Cyprus. A lot of these companies have been operating in Europe prior to the introduction of this legislation. However, they were unauthorized or they were only supervised for AML purposes under the AML regime. So I can tell you, for example, that we know that companies, just one entity, which is the biggest one in the world, has only in Cyprus 100,000 customers, which is massive, obviously, right? So I'm sure that it's in the hundreds of millions in Europe that are actually even prior to the introduction of this legislation, that they were trading or having access to digital assets. But specific numbers about market value and so on, I don't have.
Να περάσουμε σε ένα δεύτερο θέμα, πολύ σοβαρό επίσης, το Fintech, το οποίο ως γνωστόν ενισχύει την καινοτομία, αλλά από την άλλη υπάρχουν και κίνδυνοι από τη χρήση των νέων τεχνολογιών στην παροχή υπηρεσιών σε σχέση με τα νέα χρηματοοικονομικά προϊόντα. Σε ποιο πλαίσιο θα πρέπει να κινούνται πλέον οι επόπτες ως προς τη ρύθμιση και την εποπτεία των νέων προϊόντων? Θα ήταν χρήσιμη η τοποθέτησή σας. Να ξεκινήσουμε με τον κύριο Xaritos.
Ωραία.
Ναι. Sorry, I should again turn English. So, indeed, fintech, it's a reality. So, you know, what we have been seeing the last couple of decades is the digitalization of the financial services. So we have these fintech financial technology firms where basically they're using mobile digital platforms to provide services to their clients, a lot of the times retail clients, in a cost-efficient way, transparent and timely, which that was not the case prior to the digitalization of the financial services. So we are seeing an expansion and a greater financial inclusion within the industry because of these technologies. Obviously, you know, with all the benefits, we would have risks as well, right? So digitalization will come with risks, and it refers to basically risks as relate, for example, you know, the provision of the services to the clients, the marketing to their clients. Sometimes we would have mis-selling, misinformation to the clients. So all of these are issues with it's an after effect of the digitalization of the market. So what can we do basically as regulators to protect the market and the investors basically from these types of risks, and at the same time promote the innovation, right? So we need to strike a balance between promoting innovation, but at the same time guaranteeing that investors are protected. So for us in Cyprus, we created a regulatory sandbox. The Greece has, for a long time now, you have a regulatory sandbox. For us, it was created recently under CYSEC, where basically the idea of the regulatory sandbox is any new technologies that they want to, the entities want to offer it to the market, can come through the sandbox, apply it and use it in a regulated environment before it's actually it goes out to the market. We are using a lot of technologies. For example, we're using AI, we're using machine learning, cloud computing for our supervisory practices, because there's so much data that it's impossible if you are not using technologies. Another key point is financial education of investors. It's very, very important. Investors need to be educated. There are so many frauds and scams out there, so investors, they have to be prepared, right? So we are investing a lot on financial education. And closing, what I feel for the next day in the area of financial technology and digitalization is that we need to strike a balance, as I said earlier. Companies to be able to operate in this environment, they have to be resilient, they have to be very compliant. There needs to be collaboration within European regulators, collaboration with international regulators, and it will create financial inclusion, which is something that we all strive for.
George has said everything. There is nothing more to add. Let me just say that we, as regulators and supervisors, we have a primary objective, which is investor protection and market integrity. At the same time, we have to make sure that the way we, let's say, exercise our supervision will not burden unnecessarily and put any kind of unjustifiable obstacles to the development of any new products. So let's speak about the cryptos, for example. The innovative character of crypto or crypto as a market, together with the fact that there are new risks that we didn't have in the past. The fact that for a long period they operated without regulation at a global level, the different approaches to regulate the crypto asset market, the increased cross-border functioning of the crypto asset market. All this make the striking the balance between investor protection and foster innovation a very demanding task. So I think what is important, and I fully agree with George, in order to be successful in finding the right balance between all this, we have to make an effort which is going to be based on adequate knowledge. We need to continue our capacity building. When we speak about fintech, we speak about novel products. So we need to make sure that we build our capacity, not only the market in the fintech laboratories, but also the regulators. So we need to make sure that we continue the capacity building, we have the adequate knowledge, we have the skill acquisition necessary, and the willingness to cooperate among us, among the regulators and supervisors, among the market, the fintech, at European and on global basis. So cooperation, financial inclusion, I fully agree also with George that financial literacy and financial education for us is #1 because we're speaking about new things. So in order to strike the balance, you need to make sure that we have fulfilled all these relevant parameters and that we satisfy our primary goal, which is investor protection, and at the same time foster innovation in order to make sure that we support fintech industry.
Κάτι τελευταίο, αναφερθήκατε στην εκπαίδευση των επενδυτών. Από ποια ηλικία και με ποιο τρόπο? Η σχετική νομοθεσία έχει περάσει προσφάτως και στην Ελλάδα. Κυρία Λαζαράκου.
We in the Capital Market Commission, we have put a lot of emphasis on investor protection, on the financial literacy and financial education the last couple of years. Actually, we are now preparing to publish a book for 10 years old, because you asked about the age. So our book is going to be for 10 years old and above, that will try to make understandable what capital markets and all these difficult concepts mean, the difficult terms. So we are preparing this book. We're also preparing a lexicon for the main terms for the capital markets. We are also we have already signed MOUs with universities in order to present other initiatives as well. So we are in the process of trying to, let's say, educate the public in Greece regarding not only about cryptos, which is a new thing, but also about the traditional capital markets.
Okay. Mr. Essis?
Similar to what Vassiliki said, we're undertaking a number of initiatives in Cyprus. For example, we have a voluntary project where basically we go to primary schools, secondary schools, universities with volunteers basically to teach to kids and to university students basically about financial literacy and financial products and so on, and the risks also. We're participating in the National Strategy for Financial Literacy, which is an initiative by the Central Bank, CYSEC, Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Education, and state universities. And we're participating, next week we would have the IOSCO Investor Week, where all of us, all the NCAs are participating. So there's a number of efforts basically. It has to come from a young age.
Λοιπόν, τελείωσε η δική μας η ενότητα. Σας ευχαριστώ πάρα πολύ. Κύριε Λαζαράκου, κύριε Θεοχαρίδη, να είστε καλά.